According to the theory of evolution, humanity has not taken on many forms, but it has had many forms precede us. As a result of this, we find bones of these long-lost creatures with different variations and adaptations for the times that they existed in. Sometimes being larger and hairier creatures, much like your mom, that are just standardly bigger than most modern humans. But as time has passed, Homo sapiens would become the dominant life form on this rock. Hell yeah, brother! That said, as humanity began trying to establish more and more colonies on the moon, an issue would take place. In the distant past, a man would get robbed 12 feet away from a highly popular skating area as his GF receives a lead transfusion. He would build a time machine to save her, and then failing almost immediately in that task, and giving up after only one try, he would instead go to the future. The moon is totally boned. Kind of a fat L for humanity, which would then kick off another set of events resulting in what could affectionately be known as human cattle and orcs. So in today's episode, let's not only discuss the prospect of time travel, but also the separate evolutionary pathways through the development of caste systems in response to being trapped underground. We kick off today's story with music crescendos you will never hear because I will get copyright. As a school lets out, everyone in suits goes walking down the stairs. We are headed to the Applied Mechanics and Engineering ward as Bro then writes the same thing I write on notepads in hotels to make it look like I'm smart. Ah yes, 2 plus 1 actually equals 4. Very good. As a man mentions Emma, it's beginning to snow, which actually there's a reason for that if you didn't know. It was around this time frame. It's known as the Little Ice Age for some reason. Okay, so you know like Charles Dickens, A Christmas Carol and all that, how it's like really cold and snowing and all that good, wonderful things, and how in the past it was always snow. Well, it was around this time frame that on the sun, we know there were like significantly less sunspots, which you think, oh, sunspots, that's where it's dimmer, so it's not as, heat. Actually wrong. There is so much radiation that leaks out of that it's like, yeah, it looks darker than the rest of the sun, but actually it's warmer than the rest of the sun, probably because you're looking deeper into the sun, and it's basically like leaking out. It's sort of like when you look into a fire, and the coals are producing more heat than the flame itself. Similar concept. Anyways, there was a way fewer sunspots than there are today, so, yeah, it was a lot colder. Anyways, talking about applied mechanics and being a professor, as he says everyone here is the same, he begins walking across the street. As he heads up the stairs, a woman then tells him he has a filthy jacket. Not sure why, he was just at a school all day. And over at a workshop, a man then looks at a toothbrush. Unfortunately, the British would not perfect this technology for another 800 years. Yes, do the math on that one. Looking at the drawings of the future, it's not going to be that cool, I can tell you right now. Getting ready for his date, he then puts on the filthy jacket, apparently, and then heads out into the street, running in front of a ton of horses and carriages, getting hit immediately, ending this movie. Thanks for watching. Approaching the park, a powered carriage breaks down, or maybe we should just call it a car, as this random guy offers him a ride and then he takes off. Entering the park, we see the moon as then we approach the ice rink with a woman calling out to him. Hopefully nothing happens to the moon. Asking for the flowers, he then asks her to talk to him as they go for a walk through the park at night, which historically in New York, not a great idea. When I wrote that joke about the British, everybody looked British to me, so it's like, oh yeah, it's in England. Anyways, Alex begins shivering as she says, are you coming down with something? Probably because he doesn't want to be near her, but yeah, he is coming down with something. Marriage! He asks her without taking an arrow to the knee, as in he shows her the ring. It's a moonstone instead of a diamond. Of course, we really didn't start proposing with diamonds until about 1947 due to ad campaigns. I mean, nobility did it since like the 1400s, but realistically, virtually nobody bought diamonds to propose before the 1940s. That's right. That's why you got to shell out several grand for diamonds now. Absolutely flawless ad campaign by the De Beers Company. So being interrupted by some chud, he approached, he's like, "Oi!" I don't know why he has a British accent. He's like, "I see you're getting married," as he approaches and then just robs them. Bro, there's a bunch of people like 12 feet away. This is crazy to me. Having a force multiplier pulled, he then gives them all the stuff, as then he robs them of the ring, which is just, it's like, dude, I get it, but you're like a douche. You're gonna get like $4 for that. A struggle then ensues as, the girlfriend gets totally shot. Ouchies. Shuffling her mortal coil quite quickly, he has a nice cry, as one would do, as then we zoom out. Flash forward 4 years, he has more boards as he continues trying not to prove those two women's theories that 1 plus 1 equals 11, apparently. You've seen the one, probably on Instagram Reels, which is where I'm at. It's like, my parents always told me 1 plus 1 equals 11. No, it doesn't. I get the sentiment, but holy Lord. Anyways, a woman comes in telling him the dean is here to see him. Asking what happened to him, bro hasn't been processing this situation well at all for the last 4 years, and telling him to leave, he yells at him to stand still and look at him as he tells him it wasn't his fault. Running through the permutations in his mind of whose fault it actually is for this, he tells them he appreciates his concern, but to have faith in him. Telling him to come back for dinner in a week, he's apparently close to a breakthrough, so he won't even be coming back for dinner anyway, so it doesn't matter. But what dinner would he be having? Well, he could go to the future, so probably today's sponsor. But first, this episode is sponsored by Factor. I'm currently on a muscle gain arc, and you know what's been just astronomically helpful? Factor. With their fresh, never frozen, chef-curated and dietitian-approved meals delivered straight to your door, they are instrumental in me seeing that my protein goals are actually being met and making sure that I have enough to put on actual muscle mass. During this process, the one thing I wanted to do is basically, I already did the cut where I lost a lot of fat, and now I'm trying to put on as much lean mass as possible. And by doing the double protein option, I've actually been able to consistently get 175 to 200 grams of protein a day while still being within that maintained portion. This means my lifts have gone up, all while working towards hopefully getting stronger. Which, I mean, hey, you know what? Who doesn't want to be stronger? But more importantly, the meals are healthy, meaning that I have more energy, which also helps me lift. But maybe protein isn't your thing, or maybe you're just too busy. Well, they offer vegan, veggie, keto, protein plus, and several other options, so there really is something for everyone. And being a reality that you only need to put these bad boys in the microwave for 2 minutes before having a fresh, never frozen meal, what's stopping you from eating healthier? So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, then head to factor75.com or click link below and use code RoanokeFB50 to get 50% off your first Factor box plus free breakfast for 1 year. That's code RoanokeFB50 at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free breakfast for 1 year. Offer only valid for new Factor customers with code and qualifying auto-renewing subscription purchase. So looking at his watches, he then puts back on his jacket as he sets that watch. Honestly, bro, go back and just straight up burn a clip in the robber. Do us all a favor. Pulling back the curtain, well, that certainly is a thing, I suppose, and looking at Emma's picture, he puts it right next to the spinning gears, which cannot be safe. Firing that bad boy up, a beam of light shoots out as the drip goes absolutely crazy on it. Like, he literally had to make this thing look cool. It could have looked like crap, but been functional. Anyways, time begins going backwards as then he heads back into the past. Head into the park once more, Emma is waiting for him, but of course, how is he also not there, given there are now two of him? Seeing he's early, he forgot flowers again. Nice job, bro. And then making out with her in polite company, everyone is shocked. Shocked, I say. Asking if they should just walk through the park, he says, no, we probably shouldn't, as they get into a carriage and then head out to the street. Getting out, he has prevented her end. Seemingly. As they walk, Alex is super jazzed as she's alive now. The powered carriage pulls up, hopefully nothing stupid happens, and then telling her to go home instead. He tells her he loves her as, bro, this was such a quick date, it was not even worth getting ready for. Spotting flowers, he's like, okay, I'll go grab that, as then he goes and gets some. In the background, the carriage goes off as Emma now gets run over by some carriage. Okay, well, we got a real Final Destination issue here, brother. And, well, time to try again, I suppose. Over at the hospital, the dean arrives to comfort Alex, and he is speaking in riddles about being safe. He realizes if he comes back 1,000 times, he will see her end 1,000 times. I mean, maybe, but like, what? Okay, instead of... Look, I'm just spitballing here, but instead of going back like 5 minutes before she's supposed to meet her end, why not go back several hours when you already have your time machine and then bring her to the time machine and then go past that point and then see if she survives? I just, bro. Anyways, realizing the futility of this all and not thinking about it for more than 14 seconds, he does what we would all do. He heads to the future instead to see what's going on as time continues to pass and fashion changes, with dresses getting shorter. Dropping his necklace, it ages fast as his hand ages, probably several years, which appears quite painful. Zooming out, humanity has entered the space age, establishing a colony on the moon, if only. Slowing down, get this, it's May 24th, 2030. Oh, man. Yeah, we suck right now. That's a little under 4 years away, and we are not ready to establish moon colonies. We are failing the time traveler. Getting out of his machine, he then watches the portal in the sky that won't shut up. Seeing a woman, she then tries to say hey to him, as she's like, hey, nice suit. Pointing at his time machine, she says, I bet that makes a great cappuccino, as, well, he just begins walking around town. Old world and new world blended together because humanity is apparently crushing it currently. Entering the museum of sorts, he then walks past the all-knowing orb. A hologram then starts to talk to him on the glass, which means ChatGPT has entered the chat. It's in the name. Which, I mean, actually, we really aren't far from making this an actual thing already. We may have actually already done it. It contains all the human knowledge as he asks about time travel, as he requests why they cannot change the past. Seeing his own name, we get the fourth wall break as the Time Machine book is brought up. Meta. Apparently, machines can get annoyed as it rolls its eyes at him. which is not good. They shouldn't have emotions. Humanity being placed in pods for electrical battery capabilities inbound, actually. And then starting up with the time machine once more, he only makes it about 7 years into the future. As he looks out, everything is burned out and broken. Well, that's not ideal. A Humvee then arrives as they ask where his evacuation center is. Grabbing him, the sirens start going off as they all look up and spot, oh my god, well that's not ideal. The moon is falling, broken up into giant chunks. Apparently they were attempting to establish colonies and mine that bad boy, and then just straight up cracked Luna into pieces. Someone did not understand the physics of that. Good work, guys. So resisting the evacuation, they say screw you and leave them behind because they don't want to deal with that, as then they head to their own evacuation centers. Getting back in the time machine, the Earth is having issues too, as Alex then gets knocked out. Humanity has been wiped from the surface as the landscape changes and recovers with ice ages and plants. Sometimes the ice melts, though, which is pretty nice, and then turning it off, the time machine welcomes to the year, or welcomes him to the year anyways, of 802-701. Honestly, our species would have zero memory of what happened at this point, and what's creepy is we have no idea if human civilizations in the past have actually reached the tech tier we are at now. We just have no record of it. Going back to sleep, someone is wiping his face. A woman then talks to him, but he doesn't answer. Wrapping him for some reason, she then gives him water. Bro is a walking medical time bomb, by the way, and so are they, because how much do you think microbes have changed over the last 800,000 years? Waking up, New York is now a tropical paradise, because all the New Yorkers are gotten. He was looking at his clothes, he then grabs those as then he gets dressed. Spotting a youngling, he can't understand Alex at all, and following him, they are living on the side of a canyon wall. Also, it is not known if New York at this time will be in a tropical area. It's not going to be. But given the moonfall, it definitely could have tilted the planet astronomically, like literally. But realistically, New York in 800,000 years will only be about a few dozen miles from where it is now due to tectonic drift. But I choose to believe that is why everything looks a little more tropical, because it's in a tropical area. The moon getting that close would absolutely shift the planet's tilt. Anyhow, looking out, humanity clings to the canyon walls. As everyone comes to look at him, they really don't understand him. A woman can speak English, apparently, as she mentions it's the stone language. Dr. Stone language. They have forgotten the language, but she still teaches it because it's tradition. They're trying to decide if they should throw him in the water or not, which all of a sudden, now they have a fighting spirit. You're going to find out these guys are all bark and no bite at all. He then tells her he's from the past, as she informs everyone there, he hit his head and he's just a wandering idiot. With night falling, everyone starts getting ready for, night to go down. Telling them that they are called New Yorkers, he begins to tell them about his village, which is New York. Basically, it was a crapshoot. Sending the youngling to sleep, we straight up get flashed by old girl here walking up the stairs. Was that necessary? Brother, don't look up the ladder. It's bad manners. Looking out at the rest of the village, he then looks up at the moon, and that thing got totally screwed up. Oops. That would definitely be a ring by this point, though. I'm fairly certain. Somebody bring that up on Universal Sandbox or Universe Sandbox or whatever it is. Asking why they live in the canyon, she says it's safer that way. The flowers are dying, as then she says, well, maybe we could go find some tomorrow. This guy sucks at getting flowers. You don't want to bring them. Drinking with her, they then head into the jungle as we see something out there with pale blue eyes. Having a nightmare, a building then bites us as the youngling downstairs wakes up totally screaming. Crash out of the century over here woke up the whole village. The pocket watch is also now gone. Going back upstairs, they both had dreams, or they all had these dreams, as everyone there has the same dream. It's called Morlock. Okay, then. So everyone is just having that dream. Interesting. Going to these stones later, it's all stuff from ancient New York in the past, which, again, 800,000 years? Okay. We saw the glaciers form. There's no way any of this would even be left. Those things literally created the Great Lakes. Glaciers like that anyways. Like, I don't really think not everything would be ground down. Anyways, so it's traditionally, the language anyways, meant something once, so it's traditionally passed down. Sure, but 800,000 years. I don't know. I feel like humanity would have made a comeback by now. Canoeing later, Alex then asks where all the elders are. All of them have expired. And you may be wondering why. Well, it's a well-known thing. If you take out the elders and you leave only younger people, then nobody really has the experience to kind of make the world make sense, I guess is the best way to put it. Anyways, so she tells them they have left this place. They remember their elders with those spinning things in the distance. But yeah, you know what works better? Maybe sharpen a few spears and axes. Get a war party together. And then take out the issue plaguing you. I don't know. Invent the bow. We will see later the need for the bow. Entering the woods, Alex then goes off with old girl as he is led back to his time machine. Everything looks good to go. She asks if he's going back to his own time now. Well, he could go back, and then telling him, no, you actually need to go back. He is informed that he needs to take Kaylin with him. Hearing a horn blow, she takes off as he follows. She says, oh my god, they're early. The things are super early, and something is also running alongside them. Brother, where are the spears and axes? I'm just telling you, dude, like, it is human spirit. What is going on here? One then jumps out as it streaks as they begin darting everyone as old girl gets neurotoxined here, and getting back to the canoes, they exit out of the sand as the creatures are quite muscular and have faces that have apparently become more ape-like. Yeah, but you know it still works? 6 humans on one of these things with several spears stabbing it in the face. So everyone is getting straight up shreked as they are pulled down into the sands. Kaylin got shot, which doesn't even make sense given he has no meat on his bones, as Alex then smacks one in the face and it gets upsetty. Climbing to the monuments, it can jump much higher than a human, mad ups, and knocking it down, it's stunned as it begins going after him once more. Falling with the creature, it gets the upper hand for a moment as Kaylin then puts fire in its face. The hunting party is then called back as they exit into the sand with old girl being taken as well. Okay, so several questions. Soldier status in the back there. All you guys, what are you doing? In the immortalized words of the Green Goblin, cowards! This is the world, huh? Well, then why not change? Like, you're like, oh, this is just the world. This is what we do. Okay, change the world. We blew up the moon. We can change the world. Asking why they don't fight back, they say, well, the ones that fight back are taken first. Oh, really? Well, it looks like there's no elderly here either, which means eventually you're going to get taken. This is like, how about think of the future for a moment and then pick up a bow? Do something. A defensive perimeter. You guys have access to fire. Like, I'm just saying, man, there's no way humanity would be this lame about this situation. Seriously, like, even in the past, even as cavemen, if there was like a short-faced bear situation or like a saber tooth, there would be hunting parties to go take that thing out. Anyways, so asking where they're taken, apparently Kaylin knows, as it's where the ghosts are. Approaching an opening, they enter the Museum of the Past. The annoyed robot is there, thank God. The books there are completely shot as Alex then asks what's happening there. He believes what was once one race is now two, one above and one below. Humanity has split, saying humanity now has no knowledge of the past and no ambition for the future, which is why apparently they won't sharpen an axe. I mean, even to save your own skin. Anyways, the robots still remember Alex, though. Asking him how he knows about the Morlocks, he says one human did escape that situation and then told him everything, and his body is still there. He tells him to follow the breathing and he will know where to go. Thanks for being very vague. Entering the jungle, they then find the structure from the dream. It is meant to freak people out and keep them away. Kaylin admits to losing the pocket watch as Alex has no idea why they would take it. Word around your hips, and I guess it becomes a waste of time, huh? Dropping something, bats then fly out as he enters what appears to be somewhat a mechanized area, which blows because this means those things are more technologically advanced than humanity at this point, but only because they won't pick up a spear or make a trap. I just don't buy it. Looking like a real orc situation down there, they are eating meat and mining. Population seems pretty small though, which means easily taken care of. Finding a pile of clothes, that's not a good sign. And seeing one in particular, Mara's stuff in there, well, there's some good old-fashioned meat hooks everywhere. Accidentally dropping into the bone pit. Disease. Getting grabbed by one of the things that noticed him, he's then put in a cell as he walks down the stairs to whatever is going on down there. Finding Mara in particular in a cage, inquiring minds wish to know why. Being told to come closer, he doesn't bite. Yeah, fat chance, weirdo. Approaching the Awoken from Destiny, whatever that was about, I have no idea in that game. Destiny was a crapshoot. Here come the Destiny fanboys, but come on, look at it, right? Look at it. I'm a Halo fanboy to a degree. And the new Halo sucks. Well, the voice acting does. It's a pretty game. But Destiny should have been good, and it wasn't. Anyways, he asks if he is surprised to see him. He's like, yeah, I'm pretty surprised right now. He says they weren't always like this. He says some were able to actually survive above ground, being humanity, whereas most of humanity stayed below ground. And when they attempted to reemerge, at least what was left of humanity, they couldn't. I mean, look, dude, you're smart, right? This guy's got the conceptualizations of a future and a past and all this stuff. It'll be a slow process, but why not just like go out in the sun for like 20 minutes at a time, you know, and then have the younglings do that and then just keep doing it. But just straight up immediately resorting to cannibalism? Like, bro, what? So humanity apparently would breed themselves into castes. I don't know who's willingly doing that. Well, I've seen Snowpiercer. Some of humanity became the hunters, soldier status, but not very smart, whereas some were bred to focus their cerebral capabilities, which is this nerd here. He says humanity's role is to just be food. However, they could still interbreed, which is why they take some of the women, which, okay, also, what? Why not just hunt something else? Like, if you can still interbreed with humans, that means you're still human enough, or at least Neanderthal. So as he gets up and walks, his body is super crappy with his spine exiting out of his body. That's probably not good for infections. He says he is safe as he controls the creatures. However, without the control, they would overhunt humanity and exhaust their food supply within a matter of months. That is, unless we start picking up some stone tools and start splitting some orc skulls, brother, telling him that they are human and not a food supply. Mr. Albino here isn't hearing it because he's a giant nerd. Apparently, he also does have telekinesis as he just not Vulcan mind grips, the Force grips Alex and asking him what is time travel but his attempt to control the world. He knows Alex as he can look into his memories and see everything that he thinks. He's haunted by the words, what if, as this nerd makes him see his pocket watches. Bro, it is a trap. Get out of there. Being back in his workshop, he then looks over at his plans as he sees a potential future with, you know, the younglings and Emma, I suppose, and then putting his plans away, he's absolutely lost in the sauce as then he flashes back to the reality that he's actually in, telling him, yeah, it's an inescapable result of his tragedy. Some rocks then descend as Alex's time machine is just sitting there, telling him to go back to his time. I mean, dang, I didn't know the Awoken were chill like that, beyond, the whole eating humans thing. Were there really truly no other animals to eat on the surface, is all I'm saying? Like, do you just want to eat people? That's very strange. And also, why not just farm then? Go get some other animals and farm them. It's bizarre. But also, could you really go back to the past knowing what's going to happen? Like, oh, okay, cool, yeah. I mean, I guess my life is fine, but now I know exactly what's going to happen. Anyways, telling Udra or Oldrev or whatever that thing's name was from Destiny, he wants his pocket watch, handing it to him. He then grabs him as he pulls him into the time machine as everything ages around him. Mara definitely starved to death in that cage, by the way, and getting rocked by the Awoken, he punches him as, like, well, crap for a nerd. He's actually pretty strong. Breaking a gauge, the dude then falls outside the machine as he rapidly ages, turning into bones. Being in the far, far future, it is now the year 746,538,921. So, a little bit of time has passed. Basically, at this point, it's a bit hilarious because the sun's luminosity would have increased and probably wiped out all plant life, which means all life would be on notice at this point. Or at least, probably a massive asteroid would have hit us also. So looking around, the plant life is in fact gone, and what it's left are just the hunters, so we can assume regular humanity at this point is extinct. With humanity gone, what a bummer. Back in the past, Mara continues to try to escape as he returns and then frees her. Changing the future, he then sets the time machine to kill mode, apparently, which was a function it had, as he and Mara start running. Or, again, I'm just spitballing here. Maybe go back to the year of our Lord 2025 and lock and load Brides of Christ. Come back with enough firepower to clear out this entire cave system. Truly a stay strapped and start clapping moment could have been had here. But yeah, I guess stranding yourself in the future works just as well, and not being able to make sure that this crap doesn't happen with maybe other enclaves of these things around. Anyways, getting neurotoxin, which apparently does nothing. Alex probably starts feeling it, but it does nothing. Which arguably is a bit odd, as the hunters approach the time machine looking at it, and then the rest shriek and give chase. Running from that, they manage to escape by climbing the walls. The time machine stops, which then rapidly ages the whole cave as everyone is then turned into dust. Being pulled out of that, everyone then goes up the hill as the whole cave system was destroyed, annihilating those hunters. Mara apologizes for him losing his machine, which he, I guess, could technically make another, as then they hold hands. All right, girlfriend of the future established. Pulling the robot out of the museum, he begins teaching the next generation of humans, which hopefully he can instill in them a fighting spirit or moving beyond what they're doing now. And then coming to a somewhat clearing, it's his old house. How he could identify that area is beyond me without any coordinates or the landscape would have changed so astronomically. There were literal canyons that formed in New York and mountains and everything else. Anyways, so the dean and the old lady then talk about him going missing in the past as they're glad he's gone and maybe he can finally be happy. Don't know why they think this happened to him. They have nothing to base this on, as the dean offers the old lady a job and then he leaves, turning off the workshop life. Yeah, he isn't coming back, as then she says Godspeed. Panning over to the window, the dean looks at the workshop as he throws his hat and he's super happy for reasons unknown. Okay, as then he leaves, which okay, thus concludes the story where, for some reason, humanity completely lost its ability to fight and would rather have been cattle. also known as the time machine. Hello, and welcome to the science portion. Now, the thing to understand about humanity is, at our core, we will reproduce and do the same things that we do now, just with different flavors, no matter what. It's like a cell wanting to live above all other things, a micro-expression that translates into a macroorganism. This idea sort of highlights how what we are really doing is driven by biological mechanisms that appear to start on the smallest scale and then proceed outwards from there. And one of the most prevalent issues with humanity comes from the operation of our brains, which tells us we are the special and unique one, and therefore we deserve more. This is mainly connected to our survival as an individual, which, if you scale that up from there, it continues to follow the same path, which leads to the survival of your species. It's all there for you, black and white, you lose, sir. Okay, all right, crash out aside from Willy Wonka. I think what we need to do first is establish something before getting to the just absolutely horrific consequences of inbreeding coupled with societal class evolution. The issue with time travel that is existing. See, the problem here is, how exactly is this guy still on Earth? If the Earth were static and in one location permanently, that may be one thing, but to remove yourself from the flow of time is to literally remove yourself from the influence of the actual universe. The space-time continuum, which is, I don't think the word I'm trying to use, but you get the idea, indicates that space and time are connected. We know that everything exists basically creates a depression in space, and this causes things to orbit it that get close enough. The bigger the thing, or the more dense the thing, I guess, and really the more mass that it has, the more it depresses the fabric of space-time. Now, obviously, a black hole being the craziest depression of space-time. In this way, not only is space affected, but time can be affected as well. Think about getting near a black hole. To remove yourself from the effects of time is to remove yourself from the effects of gravity as well. And this creates an incredibly profound issue for Alex. Everything is moving. Nothing is static. Our planet rotates on its axis, which is currently orbiting the sun. The sun is currently hurtling through space at around 514,000 miles per hour, in the base Lord's units, or in cringe metric, that's around 828,000 kilometers per hour. So that's pretty fast. But maybe you think, oh, well, just wait for it to come back around. Well, the issue is the Milky Way itself is moving at 1.3 million miles per hour through space, or 2.1 million kilometers per hour. So if you take all these metrics, if you remove yourself from the effects of gravity for even, let's say, just like 3 seconds, you are going to be roughly, even if it was just the movement of the galaxy, you're going to be over 1,000 miles away from your original starting point in 3 seconds. And that's just in one direction. You still have Earth rotating, orbiting the sun moving too. Basically, you need to stay firmly connected. And again, if you remove yourself from time, you remove yourself from gravity. So as far as we know, you can't have one without the other. That is, I haven't lost my girlfriend to a robbing attempt, so maybe my ability to understand the Pythagorean theorem up on the board there is not exactly as connected. But what I am saying is, it creates a pretty profound issue of staying rooted in one place when you decide to break the laws of the universe. Okay, so with that out of the way, it's time to talk about the creepy ape-faced creature in the room with us. Given it was the year 2037 when the moon broke apart, what I find interesting is we all saw how the moon was getting super close. I think we probably surmised at this point that given its close brush with the planet, because had it run into the planet, there would be nobody left. And even actually it was enough to send at least a few chunks our way, which induced an ice age later. That would have caused the planet's axis to probably tilt in one way or another. This clearly would be catastrophic, again, the ice age, but from what we can see, it basically rendered the planet almost completely bare. This firestorm was very likely similar to what happened when the asteroid that took out the dinosaurs struck Earth. A ring of fire spread out from the epicenter, igniting plants thousands of miles away, or thousands of kilometers away, and as a result, many large animals were lost, and only the smaller ones would actually be able to get a foothold. And those were mammals around that time, which were probably underground, that then led to the rise of us. Following catastrophic events, typically the entire order of everything is shaken up, which in some ways is good, as it kind of gets rid of the status quo, and then new creatures can actually arise because they actually have the room to do so. But this would immediately force large swaths of humanity underground, as we have seen. It appears as though the evacuation was not even just a suggestion, it was mandatory for basically every human around this point in time. Going as far to basically be arrested, or at least arresting Alex, for not being in his evacuation group. I get it. The idea with this was probably force as many people as possible under the ground, because when the moon falls, there's no knowledge of where exactly it was going to land. Some underground structures may have been hit directly, leading to anyone in that underground area to be vaporized. The plan was, at least, some humans might survive and could come back up to the surface. However, interestingly, for this to even happen, we have to ask ourselves, How did the surface recover at all, and who are the people that are already up there? Well, the first thing to know about life, it's exceedingly resilient. When an area is stripped bare, a form of pioneer life will actually take hold on literal rocks, and these are known as primary successors. Eventually, they will build up on rocks, die, create soil, and then other, like small grasses, may come in next. The process repeats over and over as then bushes come along with smaller trees, and eventually the entire forest will mature from what was initially just a barren piece of charred rock, so long as there are at least a few plant life forms or plant seeds that could drift in. And given the water cycle was still functional as made evident by the formation of that canyon, it's unsurprising the area was able to repopulate with plants. However, what is surprising is the repopulation of humans. The Morlocks, which we will get to, kind of makes sense. That's just a human who managed to survive underground and then changed. However, the humans on the surface are a bit of an oddity. So I see two possibilities. Either these people didn't have access to a shelter and they just had to thug it out on the surface, possibly surviving maybe like a basement, or maybe they did have a personal shelter that were not state enforced, or maybe they just survived in a cave system. If this was the case, then they may have been able to come out onto the surface more often at their discretion. Of course, what they would find would be horrific, but enough of them must have survived in one area, allowing for successful reproduction without the issue of genetic drift. Which means, well, they probably didn't have to force everybody into those bunkers, but hey, it is what it is. Genetic drift is, in case you don't know, just like the random change in gene variant frequencies within a population over time. The smaller the population, the more genetic drift. And this definition will become incredibly important here in a little bit. Or the other possibility of this is that the humans on the surface may have simply been an ancient group who still had access to the surface from their state-mandated evacuation center. If this was the case, for one reason or another, whether by chance or digging themselves out, they were able to leave and work the surface to possibly rebuild. Now, clearly they would experience hardships. Those first few hundred years were probably quite brutal on Earth. However, what I actually believe, this is actually the population that is here is not a local population that is that was just being in New York, right? Let's be real. Humans travel. It's sort of our thing. And this population that got here, if they were here for the whole time, literally had a several mile high glacier on top of them at some point in time, meaning there's no shot they were here. Anyone on the surface who chose to live here around this time frame would be insane. Instead, much like the snowball Earth in the past, when it was hypothesized that there was only like a band of water and land not covered in snow existing roughly between the Tropic of Cancer and Capricorn, that humans on the surface would naturally have looked for other locations. And the reason that this can get out of control is due to the albedo effect. Basically, the more snow and ice you have on the planet, the more it reflects sunlight and heat back out into space, so the colder it gets. Whereas the less ice you have, the more it absorbs heat, so the warmer it gets. Kind of a crappy situation there, but very likely the planet had this extreme tilt that I mentioned earlier, or has completely changed its rotational pattern due to the moon being there and even how close that it is. But they would have likely left that area, and then thousands of generations later, humanity would have completely forgotten what a New York was, which is the best timeline, some would argue. They would then return, where they would run into the Morlocks once more, which is less than ideal. Why they would choose to stay there once running into these things is beyond me. There has to be other hospitable locations with humans, but this specific population seems content with being cattle. Could not be me. Now, the Morlocks were having much less of a cash money time than those humans who stayed out on the surface, and this could have been either enforced by the state, or it could have been as simple as a giant piece of building blocking the door that then was run over by a glacier several miles tall. But undeniably, humanity was gonna human. Very likely what took place for these humans is they got lucky enough to survive the initial blast from the moon. It's clear New York survived at least the brunt of the impact, as headcanon says France was directly hit, turning it into an inlet for the Mediterranean. A man can dream. But given the museum was still there, it must be that the buildings that were there did survive somewhat. We do see for like a second a lot of crap got totally messed up, but that's very likely from the ash fall that happened after the moon pieces hit Earth. Anyhow, as France was impacted, the Europeans probably aren't doing so hot, but those New Yorkers are now stuck there. They may have exited to see, well, yeah, it totally sucks out here, so the only plan past that point is to just sit tight and wait for the surface to recover. But this would have profound consequences on the body, as we will come to find out. See, the things about humans are, as I have stated, the individual considers themselves special and more deserving because that continues their own survival, which arguably does help the survival of the species overall. This is sort of where the idea that, like, let's say you smoke and drink knowing the risks of doing so. The brain will naturally tell itself, that the consequences happen to other people, not to me. Then the person legitimately is shocked when it happens to them. That is the human brain at work. The main issue was likely very going to be associated with class structure because those at the top are special and unique. The Awoken over here was clearly of a higher financial class at the beginning. Now, why would that matter at the end of the world is beyond me, but it very likely is because this is how things went down. As everyone was forced into the underground bunkers, they would get stuck or have no interest in the surface given the complete lack of large game up there and ability to actually farm. If I remember correctly, ash does not make good farming soil. Several farm animals would have gone extinct at this point, probably all of them, meaning other methods would need to be explored for survival under the ground. Likely, this involved farming bugs or somehow having some plants exposed to UV light that you had brought down with you to help them grow. As time passed, the issues would continue to get worse. Machinery is inevitably going to break down, which means you would have to scavenge for other parts to fix it. But where to take them from? Well, it's clear the class system came into play at this point when it started becoming about making tougher and tougher decisions. The haves versus the have-nots. The haves would clearly be in the they're going to be with the more resources because after the moon was messed up, it's not like it would be immediate. There was likely some time to build or at least retrofit structures under the ground that likely already existed given the technological advancements of humanity at that point in time. I mean, if we were building colonies on the moon, you could probably assume that Earth's crust was riddled with structures at this point. So as the classes separated, you probably had government, engineers, the rich just in one area with regular people being in another area who were going to be essentially the worker class. Things would get dire over time, no doubt, as machine parts were cannibalized, but remember, generations are passing while this is happening. It is likely if you were working class but had a hot daughter or something, the higher class would take interest. But if you look like a potato, well, you would continue hanging out with the working class and interbreeding with them. So, as things continued, it's likely, or it's very incredibly likely actually, that the digging would start, not only to help branch out, but also to look for resources in the ground. And given that probably the door was blocked, this may have been their attempt to escape this area. Basically, this is a metro situation, just with everyone being stuck and no chance of getting onto the surface, even if the nukes did drop. It's also important to remember, probably every surviving enclave of humans thought that they were completely alone and responsible for repopulating the planet. Because, long-range radio waves you don't have them. And at this point, like I said, we're pretty technologically advanced. There's no telling if we put all of our ability to communicate with one another in like satellites, and now we can no longer even talk to those satellites. And after 800,000 years, those satellites are gone anyways. So basically what this would do psychologically is the pressure to not act out and do something stupid would be immense, which the upper class would know this and likely control people with this information. So as they dug, expansive structures would be created, giving enough space to kind of spread out. By the Awoken's reckoning, this is when the split probably began. They call it a caste system, but it likely started out as just a class system, which had some horrific biological consequences. Considering themselves to be more intelligent, the higher class would then interbreed with the higher class, again likely taking on the initial generations of more attractive people from the working class in order to supplement their own genetic diversity. The reason is the aforementioned genetic drift. When a population is small, this creates like the founder effect. In this case, though we have no idea how many people were there, but it wouldn't have been that many. But you have an issue of recessive genetic traits building up, which is bad. Every person contains at least a few genes that would be detrimental to the next generation's health in one way or another if that was to be the dominant gene, or at least the only gene available for them to use, which is why meiosis and sexual reproduction are so important, as it randomizes the genes a little bit better so that one recessive gene does not completely dominate in one population. But let's say you have a population of 50 people who were put down into the evacuation bunkers. If the mating pairs were completely random, by the first generation, it's likely the accumulated inbreeding numbers would be around 1%. Not bad, you say, but by 100 years, that would be around 4%. Still not terrible, but by 250 years, that's up to 10%. Imagine 10% of Americans since we started being inbred. And if you say a bunch of smack about the South, shut up, you can marry your first cousin in New York and California. That's weird, brother. Anyways, by about 1,000 years, you're going to be about 33% inbreeding, which that doesn't mean, two of the people aren't inbred. That means pretty much 2 out of 3 people. That means pretty much everybody is like 33% inbred, which is not great. That would have some pretty profound impacts on your brain functioning, but a third of your genetics are basically just recessive genes at this point. And this is not to say this might be some critical issue, but about 100 to 300 years, the consequences of genetic drift or those recessive alleles beginning to build up in the population would start to become horrific for humanity down the line. There is a point, though, by about 800,000 years in the future, you're probably okay because that population size is established. But here we have these humans, or what were humans, all inbreeding, creating a whole host of problems, which is where we start getting into the morphological changes induced by this inbreeding, which we will get to here in a second. But first, we need to discuss the actual caste system that develops. At this point, 800,000 years in the future, there were seemingly 3 species of Homo with a subvariant within one of those species. There are regular Homo sapiens on the surface, which are absolutely goated, except for the fact that these are cattle who apparently completely forgot how to build a bow and then fight back against something that is literally taking your parents and your young. There is no shot humans will let this stand. It doesn't matter how aggressive the Morlocks are, someone is going to fight out of sheer anger alone. I'm sorry. Does testosterone exist? Then you're probably going to fight. So next you have Homo nerdicus, as I call them. This is the awoken. They appear, from their own words, to a focus on the more cerebral capabilities, as they call it. Freaking nerds. This results in them having the ability to not only read minds and project that exceedingly far into the surrounding area, but also use what appears to be telekinesis. The reality of that this thing is coordinating with the surface humans to cultivate through communication to bring them food, or at least not doing that, is absolutely wild. He could literally talk to them, be like, hey guys, we need some food so that we stop eating you. And then you could just do that. Anywho, so the next you have Homo swolensis. These are the hunters and the worker class. Having become larger than your average human, their job is to retrieve humans for nutrition, but also the more larger worker class down in the caves is there to build and maintain the environment. The issue with Homo swolensis is they are not very intelligent. Clearly, they are going to be the more detrimentally inbred of the group, and this is a result of class becoming caste through their time underground, which then became evolutionary traits. But to get to the more cerebral Homo nerdicus, we need to understand swolensis first. You know where we need to start with this one. It is well known at this point. Starting with the feet, we see they have actually become quite large depending on the actual job that they have. Their feet are quite bony and thick, and they have developed claws on their feet, but apart from that, they still possess the plantigrade structuring. The only reason they appear this kind of way is because they run after humans at this point. The legs of the hunters are also quite large and stronger than an average human's. This allows for them to run faster and leap absolutely massive distances. And also, the up game is crazy. You're talking like 20 feet jump distance into the air. The contractile force associated with this is well beyond what humans can do, and this would snap muscle and break bones under that sort of force for us. And also, landing is not happening. This indicates that the bones themselves are likely double bone density, possibly even triple bone density, and the connection points of the ligaments, tendons, and muscles are more robust. They're essentially a beefed up person at this point, beyond what we are even capable of. Sort of like, to be honest with you, an ape. However, this has had other effects. The musculature on their body continues up into the abdominal region and pectoral muscles, as well as their shoulders. Their backs, interestingly, we'll also see this with Nerdicus, have a slight hump on them. Much like the other side of their species, this extra muscle surrounding the spine is likely because of their propensity to hunch over in cave systems. However, in the Nerdicus species, it is a different reason. The development of the erector muscles to do this would have been an epigenetic trait at first, which is based on the expression of specific genes to adapt to an environment rather than a dedicated gene. But likely over time, this may have actually become a standard genetic requirement through the process of evolution. You know, the ones that it randomly mutated in became the more successful because they could hunch over more. So as we move down to the arms, they are larger than a normal human's arms, with the forearms having been lengthened to about a size and a half of humans. And this is due to the fact that they squat down a lot like apes do and now use their arms in a quadrupedal fashion in order to help them walk, probably in cave systems. The knuckles have been calloused, indicating that this does take place, and their hands look very similar to a gorilla's. The head is the most telling of this new evolutionary route. This is literally, wait, go back, I want to be monkey. The spine appears to connect more so on the back of the head rather than under in like a standard Homo sapiens. This also means that the connection points of the muscles on the skulls have likely made the skulls smaller area for the brain, so they're dumb. Anyways, the skull is elongated somewhat, flattening the top and creating a much more sloped frontal plate. The brain inside has likely also changed quite dramatically and shrunk in size due to them essentially being domesticated. Yeah, they don't really think so much for themselves, but we'll kind of get there. The face itself is also flattened, with the nose going missing for the most part. The brow ridge has thickened due to the likely higher levels of testosterone to support the muscle mass, and they also have hair that grows out of the top of their head, but it's thick and matted. The skin is a pale grayish color due to their time underground. However, there is pigmentation that does kind of allow them to go above ground. Getting to Homo nerdicus, these guys were clearly the upper class that got trapped down there. By separating themselves, they would likely orchestrate and dictate to the workers something like arranged marriages or reproduction over time due to their lower class status. Clearly, this probably didn't work everywhere, and someone would smack the absolute piss out of someone else. But by using the working class in New York, they would take some of the women to interbreed with, which in turn would cause them to have more genetic variety. As time passed, this in turn would use basically the working class to clearly steal women from the surface so that they did not end up like the working class themselves. Because as the Awoken mentioned, he controls the things, and if he didn't control them, they would basically overhunt and eat everybody within just a few months. Which, when Alex goes to the future, we see actually is the case. Of course, all the plant life is gone because the sun has increased in luminosity, completely disrupting photosynthesis. But anyways, so this allowed for the retention of mostly human traits, but what's interesting is they still possess the same spinal erector muscle traits that we see within Swolensis. They claim to have worked on the more cerebral areas of their species, and as a result, this left the more appearance they have like lithe, and apparently they are also more fragile. Their brain, however, appears to have gained new abilities, allowing them to read minds and utilize, if that's what it is, telekinesis. Now, is it really telekinesis? No, I think it's something else. So when we look at Nerdicus, we have to ask, is the spinal area only muscle? I actually don't think so. When he describes working on the cerebral area, what I believe they were doing was being selective about their breeding, and the most intelligent of the group essentially were the ones who kept reproducing, and they would add regular female humans every once in a while in order to prevent the buildup of too many recessive genes in the Nerdicus bloodline. This tells us a few things. First, much like how male Neanderthal were clapping female sapiens, and some poor down on his luck male sapien was clapping female Neanderthal, you know that guy never told his buddies about it. Even after 800,000 years, the populations are still able to interbreed. Also, given the forehead size, and that's saying something, I believe their brains are larger, but also believe the spinal cord does have a part to play. When we look at the spine, it goes beyond what would be considered needed or normal for the function of their body. Yet somehow he can project his thoughts, and he's like moving with not that much issue. I mean, he is kind of slouched because he's a nerd, but whatever. I believe this indicates something about the spinal cord and the brain itself. First, we have to dispel the idea that the spinal cord is just a bridge. It is actually much more than that. There's actually a man a while back who severed his spinal cord around the lumbar area in a dirt biking accident. When they connected what was essentially a spinal exciter to the severed area, they found he could think about moving his foot, and he was able to do it. The exciter was not dictating it to his brain that he should move that part of his foot. It was simply providing the electrical impulse in which it could move. And so this would seem to indicate that movement is not just due to the primary motor cortex or cerebellum, but actually is done by the spine as well. If this is the case, then that means the spine is also thought with to a degree, making it more than just a bridge to relay signals, which we already know is the case somewhat due to the spinal arc. Basically, when you grab something and it burns your hand, your spine decides to let it go rather than your brain having to kind of interpret the information and then make the decision, as this would take way too long for that nerd in your head to let it go, and then too much damage would be incurred. So then, what I actually believe we are seeing with Nerdicus is actually rather interesting. Not only has the brain increased in size, but so too has the spinal cord neuronally speaking. So then, what are the effects? It would seem that the frontal lobe would be part of the increase in size, meaning that he may be more intelligent and capable of planning, but the brain can only get so big. The skull kind of gets in the way. So given he controls the workers and the hunters, this intelligence is all-encompassing. He likely thinks for these creatures, but then how does he accomplish it? Well, I believe this is where the increase in spinal mass comes into play. By adding neurons here, not only can you avoid, overburdening the brain, but you can also put it elsewhere in the body. It would not be as constrained, I guess you could say, as increasing the neurons in the skull would be. Instead, it could be a second brain, so to speak. Now, the reason is that a lot of kind of ideas come together where you're like, oh, well, why don't we just add neurons to the brain? So the brain can, neurons between them, good Lord, neurons communicating to your brain can only communicate so quickly. If you were to double the neurons, if you tried to think about something or move in a certain way or do anything or react to your environment, it would take much longer for you to do, which is not good. But then also that amount of neuronal tissue in your head would increase the amount of heat, which your body would not be able to get rid of as well, which again is also an issue. But if you put the neurons in your spine, you may have a better chance at not only keeping it cooler, but also preventing basically that slowdown of the actual use of your body, I guess is the best way to put it. So no doubt the brain has increased in size, likely utilizing areas such as the frontal parietal network. Within this area, mirror neurons reside. Now, what exactly do these do? Well, mirror neurons are a neuron, or as a neuron, are pretty odd. They allow us to see micro-expressions in people's faces and discern intent from that. They also scan for patterns in like grasses and stuff. The word pareidolia, if that means anything to you, kind of like how we see faces in everything, even if it kind of looks slightly face-like, that's because of the mirror neurons. They also activate when copying someone else and also in learning. More interestingly, it's what appears that they're capable of connecting outside of what should just be standard learning. As always, you remember the card, I guess, psychic trick thing from Ghostbusters? That was a real test to see if humans had some form of telepathic abilities. In fact, the CIA has been doing this for a while, like with astral projection. And if you want to know how weird that is, a lot of, like, some of the people they sent to astrally project into Soviet bases were actually able to map those bases perfectly. And it was only discovered after the fact that they were right when the Soviet Union collapsed and then those places got explored. Anyway, so what they found in those who were able to guess the correct card, the mirror neurons lit up as opposed to those who were truly guessing, which their frontal lobe had more activation. So what does this mean? Well, given the electromagnetic field of the brain, it appears, take this with a grain of salt, that potentially mirror neurons may detect the fields of others and can potentially glean information from it. If the brain puts off a frequency from its own mirror neurons that is then picked up by another's mirror neurons and they fire in the same way, then perhaps the information can be pushed out and understood by the brain. Now, this would clearly explain why everybody was having the same dream up in the canyon. So in that same vein, actually, IRL, researchers at Princeton's Pear Laboratory claimed that when a subject concentrated on pushing a random number generator towards a particular result, that result appeared fractionally more often. But again, the effect was extremely small, it's controversial, and nobody's really accepted it as scientific proof that thought can control matter. It was just one of those things that's like, we did not expect that. Sort of like when we observe the quantum universe, I guess the best way to put it, and then the results change when we observe it versus when we don't. So again, take all this with a grain of salt, but does it mean potentially the development of telepathy through mirror neurons? Maybe. But concerning this fictional creature before us, I believe when we get to the telekinesis that this is a different thing entirely. And it's one thing to read someone's mind, it's another entirely to move them. I believe the spinal cord likely then contains some mirror neurons on its own, or neurons that are capable of putting off a strong enough field that its activation actually fires the neurons of others, specifically the motor neurons. When he grabs Alex's throat, it's not force floating him. Instead, before Alex realizes what happens, his own motor neurons in his legs and feet activate, pushing him towards the awoken, I guess here, making it appear like telepathy. Well, not telepathy, telekinesis. It appears at will the albino man can activate not only neurons in the occipital lobe, but also Alex's spinal cord as well. And this is clearly seen when Alex sees the future past he may have had with Emma. It's just neuronal activation within his skull. What I find really dumb, however, is when this creature doesn't just immobilize Alex in the fight and instead decides to go mano-a-mano with him. For as smart as it sure is stupid. But essentially, these creatures in the future are nothing but two extremes for humanity. One specking into the warrior class entirely, another completely into the mage class, when really, humans are meant to be paladins because that is the most alpha Chad of classes. So the question remains, however, how plausible is all of this really? Well, the changing of humans due to subterranean conditions and inbreeding is incredibly plausible, but probably won't result in these creatures in particular. The reality is, the first few hundred years is going to produce probably incredible sickly and fragile humans, like think of the Habsburgs, that get worse over time for about 1,000 years or so. Then it will stabilize as numbers climb, but by then you'll have a species that likely isn't as intelligent as they once were, or even as capable. And then the problem becomes you have to worry about drowning in a thunderstorm from looking up with your mouth open. As for Nerdicus, these guys are highly unlikely. While the upper class for a time would be spared as much of the inbreeding, it is very unlikely it would be a permanent thing. Instead, after a few hundred years, what would really make them the upper class anymore? How would they be distinguished from others? And would the Swolensis revolt? It's very unlikely they would have survived long term without any debilitating issues. But anyhow, I hope you guys enjoyed learning about these creatures today. If you did enjoy, then please leave a like and a comment. As I have maintained, YouTube switched to AI, and it only reads likes and comments as any form of metric nowadays. And you guys have been commenting and liking. It's been very, very helpful, so I do appreciate that. I'll drop my Twitter, Discord, Patreon, Roanoke Tales, and Roanoke Games link where live streams are going, as well as my Instagram links down in the comments. Well, not the comments, but the description. And speaking of patrons, I'd like to thank mine real quick. At the Astronaut tier, we have Army and Kuseth. Thank you guys for your awesome continued support. At the Astrophysicist tier, we have Death Dancer, Webtron Supreme, and Eddie the Ingy. Thank you guys as well. And at the Scientist tier, we have the Chat of Chuds, Metric System, Invictus Echo, Official Texan, SSJ4 Lotus, and Gina Elaine. Thank you guys as well. And the rest of my patrons, I really do appreciate y'all's support. Keeps things running around here, and you're absolute ballers for it, so thank you. But all right, that's going to do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I will see y'all in the next one.